At 3 a.m., the silence of the Sterling mansion was not broken by an alarm, but by a terrifying rhythmic crackling that sounded like a beast devouring the house from the inside out. Hattie Mae sat up in her narrow bed in the servants' quarters, her heart hammering against her ribs. For 68 years, she had learned to trust her instincts, and tonight, the air tasted wrong, bitter, metallic, and dangerously hot. She sniffed the darkness. Smoke. Thick, choking smoke. "Lord, guide my feet," she whispered, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Her arthritic knees protested with a sharp ache, but she ignored them. She grabbed her flannel robe and rushed into the hallway. The main fire alarms, the state-of-the-art system Mr. Robert had paid thousands for, were silent. The only sound was the roar of the inferno consuming the West Wing. Panic flared in her chest, but not for herself. Sammy. Hattie didn't run toward the exit. She turned toward the stairs leading to the family nursery. The heat was already a physical wall, pushing her back, stinging her eyes. She pulled the collar of her robe over her nose and forced herself upward. The banister was hot to the touch. "Sammy, baby, answer me." Hattie screamed, her voice raspy from the smoke. She burst into the nursery. The room was filling with gray haze. The little boy was nowhere to be seen. Hattie dropped to her hands and knees, scanning the floor. A small whimper came from beneath the bed. She reached under, her fingers brushing against trembling flannel pajamas. "I've got you, child. Nana Hattie's got you," she coughed, dragging the terrified 5-year-old into her arms. He clung to her like a lifeline, burying his face in her shoulder. The hallway was now impassable, blocked by a curtain of orange flames. Hattie turned back to the bathroom attached to the nursery. She turned on the tap, soaked a heavy quilt in cold water, and wrapped it tightly around Sammy and herself. "Hold on tight, sugar," she commanded softly. "We're going down the back way." Using the narrow servant's staircase that she had scrubbed thousands of times, Hattie descended. Every step sent a jolt of pain through her hips, but she didn't falter. She shielded Sammy's head with her hand, murmuring prayers and reassurances until the cool night air hit her face. They burst out of the side door and onto the snowy lawn. Hattie collapsed onto the frozen grass, her lungs burning, coughing up soot. The cold snow seeped into her nightgown, but the relief was overwhelming. They were alive. "Hattie." "Sammy." She looked up to see Tiffany standing near the driveway, safe and untouched. The fiancé was wearing a silk robe that shimmered under the streetlights. Hattie squinted through her watering eyes. Tiffany looked annoyed. There was no soot on her face, no singed hair. She was clutching her designer purse as if she were waiting for a taxi, not watching her future husband's home burn to the ground. Just then, headlights swept across the lawn. Robert's SUV screeched to a halt. He jumped out, leaving the door open, and sprinted toward them. "Sammy." "Oh God, Sammy." Robert fell to his knees, pulling his son from Hattie's arms and crushing him into a hug. Tiffany immediately let out a loud, theatrical sob. She rushed forward, throwing her arms around Robert's neck. "Oh, Robert. It was awful. I tried to get to him. The fire, it moved so fast." Hattie watched from the ground, her chest heaving. She saw Tiffany's hands clutching Robert's coat. They were clean, perfectly manicured. Not a speck of ash. A chill that had nothing to do with the winter wind settled in Hattie's bones. She had seen Tiffany wandering the halls hours ago, claiming insomnia. Now the alarms hadn't worked, and the fiancé was dressed for a photo shoot while the house burned. Fire trucks roared up the driveway, sirens wailing. The fire captain jumped out and approached Robert, shouting orders to his men. As the fire captain approaches Robert, Tiffany cuts in sharply. "It was old wiring, wasn't it? This old house is a death trap." Her eyes darting toward Hattie with a look that promised, "Something doesn't smell right about this fire, and it's not just the smoke." Tiffany looks far too clean for someone who just escaped a disaster, doesn't she? If you are already rooting for Hattie to protect that little boy, please comment the number 1 below to show you're with us. And if you want to see justice served, please take a moment to subscribe to the Black King channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss a moment of the truth unfolding. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Now, let's find out where they will go now that the mansion is in ruins. The fire captain declared the mansion a crime scene and uninhabitable, leaving the billionaire and his family standing in the snow, shivering and homeless for the holidays. Robert stared blankly at the smoldering skeleton of his estate, phone in hand, scrolling through contacts for five-star hotels. "We can go to the peninsula," Robert said, his voice shaking slightly. "Or the Four Seasons. They'll have a suite." At the word hotel, Sammy let out a high-pitched shriek. He buried his face into the folds of Hattie's soot-stained nightgown. "No. No big buildings. They burn. I want Nana Hattie's house. It's small. It's safe." Robert looked helpless. Hattie stroked the boy's hair, her touch steady despite her own exhaustion. "Mr. Robert, my place isn't much, but it's warm. And I've got a pot of soup that just needs heating." Tiffany gasped, horrified. "Robert, you can't be serious. The South Side? Is that even safe at this hour?" "It's settled," Robert said, cutting her off. "Sammy needs to feel safe. We're going to Hattie's." The drive was silent. As the luxury SUV left the manicured lawns of the North Shore and crossed into the working-class neighborhood where Hattie had lived for 40 years, the atmosphere in the car shifted. Tiffany audibly clicked the door locks. She stared out the window at the row houses and chain-link fences with undisguised disgust, clutching her purse as if the locals could reach through the tinted glass. "Here we are," Hattie said softly as they pulled up to a modest bungalow with peeling white paint but a neatly shoveled walk. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon, old wood, and the faint, comforting scent of lavender. It was small, cluttered with photos of ancestors in Sunday hats, but it was immaculate. Hattie bustled about, turning up the radiator which clanked to life with a welcoming hiss. She began to hum a low, rich gospel tune, his eyes on the sparrow, the vibration of her voice instantly calming Sammy, who curled up on the worn velvet sofa. Tiffany, however, remained standing. She pulled a packet of antibacterial wipes from her bag. With a tight, grimacing smile, she vigorously scrubbed the wooden dining chair before perching on its very edge. "Don't you have family who will mind us being here?" Tiffany asked, her tone dripping with insinuation. "I mean, it's rather crowded." "It's just me, Miss Tiffany," Hattie replied, filling a kettle. "My son Marcus lives nearby, but he works for the city. He keeps long, hard hours." Tiffany smirked, a small, cruel expression. Sanitation? Construction? It must be hard work." She clearly assumed he was a laborer. Hattie didn't correct her. She just smiled a secret, proud smile. "Tea." Hattie brought out a tray with her best floral china, the cups chipped but loved. Tiffany recoiled slightly. "Oh, no thank you. Is the tap water here filtered? You know, old pipes and lead, one can't be too careful in these neighborhoods." Robert looked mortified. "Tiffany, please. Hattie is opening her home to us." He took a cup. "Thank you, Hattie. It's perfect." Hattie didn't let the insult land. She maintained her grace, nodding slowly. "I'll go start some breakfast. You all rest." Hattie retreats to the kitchen to start breakfast and overhears Tiffany hissing into her phone in the hallway, "Get me out of here. It smells like poverty. I need to fix this situation fast." By 8 a.m., the aroma of sizzling bacon, buttery grits, and homemade biscuits had filled every corner of the small house, waking Sammy with the first smile he'd shown in hours. He scrambled onto a kitchen chair, his legs swinging happily as Hattie placed a steaming plate in front of him. Robert sat beside him, looking tired but grateful, devouring the comfort food as if it were a five-star meal. "This is incredible, Hattie," Robert murmured, wiping a crumb of biscuit from his lip. "I haven't had a breakfast like this in years." Across the table, Tiffany sat with a cup of black coffee, her nose wrinkled as if the smell of bacon were toxic fumes. "I don't know how you can eat that," she said, eyeing Hattie's cooking with disdain. "It's just grease and carbs. A heart attack on a plate. My trainer would have a seizure." Hattie just smiled, pouring more orange juice for Sammy. "It's food for the soul, Miss Tiffany. Keeps you warm in winter." A sharp knock at the front door interrupted them. Hattie wiped her hands on her apron and opened it to reveal Mr. Earl, her neighbor of 30 years. He was bundled in a heavy parka, holding a covered casserole dish. "Morning, Hattie Mae," Earl rumbled, his eyes scanning the room past her shoulder. Saw the fancy car out front. Heard about the fire on the news. Figured you'd have extra mouths to feed, so I brought over my sweet potato pie. Bless you, Earl, Hattie said, ushering him in. Earl stepped inside, his gaze landing immediately on Tiffany. She didn't stand up or smile. She simply stared at his worn boots on the rug. Earl narrowed his eyes. He had survived a war and decades of life in the South Side. He knew a predator when he saw one. He leaned in close to Hattie, whispering low enough that only she could hear. Keep your eyes open, Hattie May. That one walks heavy. She don't belong here, and she knows it. Hattie nodded imperceptibly. I know, Earl. Thank you. She walked Earl to the door, exchanging a few words about the icy roads. Just as the latch clicked shut behind him, a deafening crash echoed from the living room. Hattie's heart dropped. She rushed back in, followed by Robert. There, on the floor, lay the shattered remains of her porcelain vase, the blue and white one her late husband had given her for their 40th anniversary. It was the most precious thing she owned. Tiffany stood over the shards, a hand over her mouth in a pose of feigned shock. Oh, Hattie. I am so sorry. I barely brushed past the table. I told Robert earlier that table was wobbly. You really shouldn't leave fragile things on unsteady furniture. You're getting so forgetful in your old age. Hattie stared at the broken pieces. That table was solid oak. It hadn't wobbled a day in its life. She looked up, meeting Tiffany's eyes. There was no regret there, only a cold, challenging glint. It was an accident, Hattie, Robert said quickly, though he looked uneasy. I'll replace it. I promise. Some things can't be replaced, Mr. Robert, Hattie said quietly. She knelt down, picking up the shards with dignified silence, refusing to give Tiffany the satisfaction of tears. Later, while sweeping the back porch to clear her head, Hattie notices the soil in her frozen petunia pot has been disturbed. She digs her gloved fingers in, and her heart stops. She pulls out a gold lighter engraved with the initials RS. Hattie has just dug up the truth, and the game is about to change. If you are rooting for Hattie to use that lighter to take Tiffany down, please drop the number 2 in the comments below to let us know you're still with us. And if you haven't joined our family yet, I highly recommend you subscribe to the Black King channel and hit that notification bell right now. You definitely don't want to miss the moment justice is served. Your support empowers us to keep bringing you these powerful stories. Now, let's see what Hattie does with the evidence. The atmosphere in the small house had turned poisonous. Silence hung heavy over the dinner table, broken only by the clinking of silverware and Tiffany's impatient sighs. Outside, the snow was falling heavily again, trapping them in a suffocating bubble of tension. Hattie moved quietly around the table, clearing plates, her face a mask of calm. Every time she passed the window, she glanced discreetly at the frozen flower pot on the porch where she had reburied the gold lighter. She knew she held the key to the truth, but she needed the right moment to reveal it, a moment when Robert would truly listen. I'm going to give Sammy his bath, Hattie announced softly. The warm water helps him sleep. Fine, Tiffany snapped, checking her manicure. Just make sure you don't leave him alone in that tub. I don't trust the plumbing in this place. While Hattie was in the bathroom, humming a soothing lullaby to the traumatized boy, Tiffany stood up. She checked the hallway. Empty. With the precision of a predator, she slipped into Hattie's small bedroom. It was simple, smelling of lavender sachets. Tiffany curled her lip in distaste as she approached the nightstand. She pulled a heavy, sparkling diamond necklace from her pocket, a piece Robert had insured for $50,000. She looked for a hiding spot, and her eyes landed on Hattie's worn leather Bible. With a cold sneer, she shoved the diamonds deep between the pages of the Psalms, violating the one thing Hattie held most sacred. An hour later, a piercing scream shattered the quiet of the house. My necklace. Oh my God, Robert. Tiffany came running into the living room, clutching her neck, her eyes wide with manufactured panic. The diamond choker you gave me. It's gone. I took it off to wash my face and now it's vanished. Robert stood up, alarmed. Are you sure? Maybe it fell behind the dresser. I looked everywhere. Tiffany turned, pointing a shaking, manicured finger directly at Hattie, who had just walked in with a sleepy Sammy. It's her. I knew it. I told you, Robert, we couldn't trust these people around nice things. They see something shiny and they just take it. Tiffany, stop, Robert said sternly. Hattie has been with me for 10 years. She wouldn't steal. Then let me search her room. Tiffany shrieked. If she has nothing to hide, she won't mind. Hattie straightened her spine. She looked at Robert, seeing the doubt flickering in his eyes, the doubt Tiffany had planted with the broken vase and the whispered insults. I have nothing to hide, Mr. Robert, Hattie said with quiet dignity. You may look. They moved to the bedroom. Tiffany tore through the drawers first, throwing Hattie's modest clothes onto the floor. Then, with dramatic flair, she grabbed the Bible. Let's see if she hides her sins in her prayers, Tiffany spat. She shook the book. The heavy diamond necklace slid out and landed on the floor with a damning clatter. The room went dead silent. Robert stared at the jewels, his face draining of color. He looked at Hattie, and the heartbreak in his eyes was worse than any physical blow. See? Tiffany smirked, picking up the necklace. They always steal. It's in their nature. You were just too blind to see it. Hattie stood frozen. She didn't plead. She didn't cry. She realized with chilling clarity that this was Tiffany's endgame. Robert, heartbroken and successfully manipulated, whispers, Hattie, I can't believe this. I think you'd better call your family. I have to call the police. Blue and red lights flashed against the snowy window panes, illuminating the small living room. But instead of fear, Hattie watched their arrival with a strange, calm resolve. Tiffany, on the other hand, was triumphant. She stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the patrol cars pull up to the curb. Finally, Tiffany scoffed, smoothing her hair. I hope they bring handcuffs. I want this handled quickly, so we can get back to civilization. Robert sat on the sofa, head in his hands, unable to look at Hattie. The betrayal he felt was a physical weight in the room. A heavy knock pounded on the door. Tiffany rushed to open it before Hattie could move. Two officers stepped in, shaking snow from their uniforms. Behind them walked a tall, broad-shouldered man in a heavy trench coat. As he stepped into the light, the gold bars of a police captain glinted on his collar. Tiffany immediately launched into her performance. She grabbed the captain's arm, tears springing to her eyes on command. Officer, thank God you're here. It's awful. That woman. She pointed a trembling finger at Hattie. She stole my diamond necklace. We found it hidden in her room. Arrest her immediately. The captain didn't blink. He didn't even look at Tiffany. He gently removed her hand from his arm as if it were a piece of lint. He walked straight past her, crossing the room in 3 long strides to stand before the accused. Then he took off his hat and softened his voice. Are you okay, Mama? The silence that followed was deafening. Tiffany froze, her mouth hanging open. Robert's head snapped up. I'm fine, Marcus, Hattie said softly, patting the big man's cheek. Just a little tired of the noise. Mama, Robert whispered, standing up slowly. He looked from the imposing captain to the humble housekeeper. Hattie, this is your son? The one who works for the city? Captain Marcus Williams, District 4, Marcus said, turning to face them, his voice hard as granite. And I suggest you explain why you're accusing my mother of theft. The necklace was in her Bible. Tiffany stammered, her confidence crumbling into panic. She stole it. My mother doesn't steal, Ms. Vandermeer, Marcus said coldly. But we do have questions about what you were doing outside the mansion 3 minutes before the fire alarm went off. I wasn't. Tiffany shrieked. Son, Hattie interrupted calmly. She reached into her apron pocket. Before you take any statements, ask the lady why Mr. Roberts' personalized lighter, which should have burned in the mansion, was buried in my frozen flower pot 3 days ago. She placed the gold lighter on the coffee table. Earth. The initials shone under the lamp. Robert stared at it. He picked it up with trembling hands. I couldn't find this. I looked for it the night of the fire. I thought I left it in the study. He looked up, the horror dawning on his face. If this was in the study, it would have melted. The only way it survived is if someone took it out before the fire started. He turned to Tiffany. You had it. You were smoking outside. You started the fire. No. Robert, she's planting it. She's crazy. Tiffany backed away, hitting the wall. And the necklace? Robert's voice broke. You planted that too. To discredit her. You nearly killed my son, for money. Marcus turned to a pale, trembling Tiffany, his voice low and authoritative. Ms. Vandermeer, you have the right to remain silent. And I suggest you use it. The handcuffs clicked shut on Tiffany's wrists, a cold metallic sound that signaled the end of her reign of terror and the beginning of true peace for the Sterling family. As officers escorted a screaming, protesting Tiffany out into the snow, the tension in the small living room finally broke. Sammy, who had been watching wide-eyed from the hallway, suddenly broke into a run. He didn't run to his father. He ran straight to Hattie, burying his face in her apron just as he had on the night of the fire. That simple gesture told Robert everything he needed to know about who had truly been protecting his son. 2 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, Hattie's bungalow was unrecognizable. It wasn't filled with expensive imported decorations, but with the smell of honey-glazed ham, candied yams, and the sound of laughter. Robert stood in the entryway, holding a stack of wrapped gifts, looking hesitant. He was no longer the arrogant billionaire demanding hotel suites. He looked humbled. Hattie, Robert said quietly, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket once the kids were distracted. I know I can never repay you. The lawyers say Tiffany will be in prison for a long time for arson and fraud, but I wanted to give you this. He slid a check across the counter. The amount was enough to buy a new house in a better neighborhood. Hattie looked at the check, then looked at Robert. With a gentle, calloused hand, she slid it back toward him. Mr. Robert, she said firmly, you can't buy loyalty and you can't buy forgiveness with a piece of paper. I didn't save that boy for money. I did it because he's family. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Then how can I thank you? You can take off that expensive coat, sit down next to Mr. Earl, and eat some of these collard greens before they get cold, Hattie smiled. The dinner was a noisy, joyous affair. Mr. Earl was telling war stories to a fascinated Sammy. Marcus was off duty, laughing loudly at Robert's attempt to navigate a chicken wing with a fork and knife. For the first time in years, Robert wasn't checking his phone or worrying about appearances. He looked around the cramped table, at the mismatched chairs and the people who had welcomed him without judgment. He stood up, raising his glass of iced tea. The room went quiet. To Hattie, Robert's voice wavered with emotion. To the woman who didn't just save my son's life, but saved our souls from a terrible mistake. You taught me that a house is built of bricks, but a home is built of love. Merry Christmas, Nana, Sammy shouted, hugging Hattie tightly. Merry Christmas, baby, Hattie whispered, holding him close. As the camera pans out to the snowy street, the warmth of Hattie's small home glows bright in the night, proving that the richest home is not the biggest one, but the kindest one.